Captain Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold metal wall of the bridge. His hands shook as he watched the enemy ship floating dead in space. 6 years of war had led to this moment. 6 years of watching friends die, colonies burn, and families torn apart. Now the biggest enemy ship in the galaxy was broken and powerless right in front of him. The UES Defiance had taken heavy damage in the fight. Half the crew was dead or wounded. The hull had holes big enough to fly a shuttle through, but they had won. Against all odds, humans had beaten the mighty Zephyrian Empire in their biggest battle yet. Jake turned to look at his crew. These men and women had followed him through hell itself. They had fought when everyone said they should surrender. They had kept going when the enemy had better weapons, better ships, and better everything. But humans had something the Empire did not understand. They never gave up. Lieutenant Amy Carter walked over to him. Her uniform was torn and burned from the battle. Blood ran down her left arm from a piece of metal that had cut her when the bridge shook. But she still stood straight and proud. "Captain," she said in a quiet voice, "the enemy flagship is asking to surrender. They want safe passage for their crew." She stopped talking and looked around to make sure no one else could hear. "Sir, our boarding teams just sent word they found someone very important on that ship." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. "Who?" "Emperor Valdris himself, sir. The Emperor of the Zephyrian Empire is on that ship. Our boys caught him." The bridge went completely silent. Every person there understood what this meant. Emperor Valdris was the most powerful being in known space. He ruled over 12 star systems. His word was law for billions of people across the galaxy. He had never lost a battle in his long life. Until today. Jake thought about all the humans who had died in this war. The Empire had attacked without warning. They had destroyed entire colonies full of families. They had killed millions of people just because they wanted Earth's resources. The Emperor had started this war thinking humans would be easy to beat. He was wrong. "Get me a secure channel to Earth Command," Jake ordered, "and prepare a boarding party. We're going over to that ship." The enemy flagship was called the Eternal Glory. It was bigger than anything humans had ever built. The ship was 5 miles long and covered in weapons that could destroy planets. But now it floated in space like a dead whale. Its lights were dim and its engines were cold. Jake led 20 Marines onto the enemy ship. The halls were filled with smoke and the smell of burned metal. Dead aliens lay everywhere. The Zephyrians looked like giant bugs with 4 arms and hard shells covering their bodies. They were tough fighters, but human weapons had found ways to crack their armor. They found the Emperor in his private rooms at the center of the ship. He was sitting in a chair made of some kind of blue metal. Even sitting down, he was taller than Jake. His 4 arms were crossed and his bug-like eyes stared at the humans with hate and something else. Something that might have been respect. "So, you are the humans," the Emperor said. His voice was deep and had strange music in it. The translator device made it sound almost normal. "I have heard much about your species in recent years. You fight like demons and refuse to die when you should." Jake stepped forward. He was not afraid. After 6 years of war, he had seen too much death to be afraid of one alien, even if that alien was an emperor. "Your war is over," Jake said. "Your ship is destroyed. Your fleet is running away. You have 2 choices. Come with us as our prisoner or die here with your ship." The Emperor laughed. It was a sound like breaking glass mixed with thunder. "You think capturing me will end this war, human? I am one emperor. The Empire has existed for 1,000 years. It will continue long after I am dead." "Maybe," Jake said. "But you started this war. You attacked our homes. You killed our people. Now you get to face the consequences." "And what consequences would those be?" the Emperor asked. Jake smiled for the first time in months. "You get to come to Earth. You get to see the world you tried to destroy. And you get to explain to our leaders why you thought humans would be easy to conquer." The Emperor's eyes went wide. In all his long life, no one had ever spoken to him like this. No one had ever captured him. No one had ever made him answer for his actions. "You would take me to your homeworld? Display me like some common criminal?" You are a common criminal, Jake said. You're just a criminal who happens to rule an empire, but not anymore. The Marines put special chains on the Emperor. The chains were made from the same metal as human warships. They were strong enough to hold even a Zephyrian. The Emperor did not fight as they locked the chains around his forearms. He seemed to be thinking about something very important. As they walked back to their shuttle, the Emperor spoke again. Tell me, human captain, what will your leaders do with me? Jake thought about it for a moment. He thought about all the human colonies that had been destroyed. He thought about all the families torn apart by this war. He thought about all the soldiers who had died fighting the Empire's armies. That's not up to me, Jake said finally. That's up to the Terran Senate. They represent all of humanity. They'll decide what happens to you. Your Senate, the Emperor said slowly. Yes, I have heard of this strange human custom. You let common people decide important matters. Very unusual. Not unusual, Jake said. Just different from your way of doing things. They reached the shuttle and strapped the Emperor into a special seat built for prisoners. As they flew back to the Defiance, Jake looked out the window at the battle zone. Hundreds of ships floated, dead in space. Most of them were Zephyrian, but too many were human. Good people had died today to make this victory possible. Back on the Defiance, news of the Emperor's capture spread quickly through the ship. The crew could hardly believe it. They had not only won the biggest battle of the war, they had captured the enemy leader. It felt like a dream. Lieutenant Carter came to Jake's ready room with a message from Earth Command. Sir, the Admiral wants to speak with you immediately. And sir, we're getting communications from all over the galaxy. News of the Emperor's capture is spreading fast. Jake nodded. He knew this was bigger than just one battle or one war. This would change everything. For the first time since the war started, humans had something the Empire wanted back. For the first time, humans had real power in galactic politics. Set course for Earth, Jake ordered. Best speed. And make sure our prisoner is comfortable. He's going to be our guest for a while. As the Defiance turned toward home, Jake thought about what would happen next. The galaxy had always seen humans as young and weak. They had been wrong about human weakness. Now they would learn that humans could be generous in victory as well as fierce in battle. The Emperor sat in his cell, thinking about the strange species that had defeated him. In 1,000 years of conquest, he had never met people like these, humans. They fought with passion, but showed mercy to the defeated. They were led by common people instead of nobles. They were everything the Empire was not. Perhaps that was why they had won. The UES Defiance moved through hyperspace like a wounded animal limping home. 3 weeks it would take to reach Earth. 3 weeks with the most dangerous prisoner in galactic history locked in their hold. Captain Jake Morrison walked the damaged corridors of his ship, checking on repairs and talking to his crew. Everyone seemed different now. They had won something impossible, but the weight of what came next pressed down on them all. Dr. Lisa Hayes worked in the medical bay, treating wounded crew members. She was a smart woman who had studied alien biology for years before the war started. Now she had a new job that no human had ever done before. She had to keep Emperor Valdris alive and healthy. The Emperor's cell was in the most secure part of the ship. It had been built to hold dangerous criminals, but no one had ever thought it would hold the ruler of an empire. The walls were thick metal and cameras watched every corner. Guards stood outside the door at all times. Lisa entered the cell carrying her medical scanner. The Emperor sat on a simple metal chair, his forearms chained to the wall. Even chained, up he looked powerful and dangerous. His bug-like eyes followed her as she moved around the small room. "I am Dr. Hayes," she said. "I need to check that you are healthy." The Emperor said nothing for a long time. He just stared at her with those strange eyes. Finally, he spoke in his deep voice that sounded like music and thunder mixed together. "A human female tends to my health," he said. "How very strange. In my empire, females do not work with males. They certainly do not give orders to emperors." Lisa looked at him calmly. She had dealt with difficult patients before. "In human society, men and women work together. We are equals. Gender does not matter when there is work to be done. Equals. The Emperor repeated the word like it tasted strange. Another human oddity. Tell me, female doctor, what will your people do with me? That is not my decision to make, Lisa said as she ran her scanner over his body. I am here to keep you healthy, not to judge you. The Emperor's body was very different from human bodies. His heart was in a different place, and he had extra organs that humans did not have. But the scanner showed he was in good health despite being a prisoner. You could poison me, the Emperor said suddenly. You could make it look like an accident. Many of your people would thank you for it. Lisa stopped what she was doing and looked directly at him. I became a doctor to save lives, not to take them. Even your life. Even the life of the being who ordered the destruction of your colonies? Even that life, Lisa said firmly. That is what makes us different from you. For the first time since his capture, something like surprise showed in the Emperor's eyes. He had ruled through fear and power for so long that mercy was something he could not understand. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Lieutenant Amy Carter brought Captain Morrison more news from across the galaxy. The communications array had been working overtime, picking up signals from dozens of worlds. Captain, the Zephyrian Empire is falling apart, Amy reported. 3 different groups are fighting to replace the Emperor. His brother, Prince Kaleth, claims to be the new ruler, but 2 other generals are also saying they should be in charge. Jake nodded as he read the reports. Good. Let them fight each other instead of us. What about the other alien governments? The Galactic Senate has called an emergency meeting. They want to discuss what to do about the war and about our prisoner. Some species are saying we should turn the Emperor over to them for trial. Jake felt anger rise in his chest. After 6 years of letting the Empire attack us without help, now they want to take over? I don't think so. There's more, sir. The Centauri Republic is offering to mediate peace talks. The Vegan Alliance wants to set up a neutral zone, and the Andromedan Federation is demanding that we release the Emperor immediately. Let them demand, Jake said. The Emperor is our prisoner. He attacked our worlds. He killed our people. He will face human justice. 3 days into the journey, something unexpected happened. The Emperor asked to speak with Captain Morrison. Jake was curious about what the alien ruler might want to say, so he agreed to meet. Jake entered the cell with 2 guards behind him. The Emperor looked up from where he sat on his simple bed. The chains made soft music as he moved his 4 arms. Captain, the Emperor said, I have been thinking about our conversation on my ship. You said I would face consequences for my actions. What did you mean by that? Jake sat down on a chair across from the prisoner. You started a war that killed millions of people. In human law, that makes you a war criminal. War criminals face trial for their crimes. A trial, the Emperor said slowly. You would put an emperor on trial like a common thief? In human society, no one is above the law. Not presidents, not generals, not even emperors. The Emperor was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke again. I have ruled for 300 years. In all that time, no one has ever questioned my decisions. No one has ever told me I was wrong. Maybe that was the problem, Jake said. Perhaps, the Emperor admitted. Tell me about this trial. How does it work? Jake explained how human courts worked. He told the Emperor about judges and juries, about evidence and witnesses, about the right to defend yourself and the right to a fair hearing. The Emperor listened carefully to every word. Your people would give me the right to speak in my own defense? The Emperor asked. Yes. Even prisoners have rights in human society. Even prisoners who have killed your people? Even them. The Emperor leaned back against the wall. I begin to understand why you won this war, Captain. Your species is very different from mine. 2 weeks into the journey, Dr. Hayes made a discovery that changed everything. During one of her regular medical checks, the Emperor began to talk about the war from his point of view. I thought your species would surrender quickly, he said as Lisa checked his vital signs. You had inferior weapons, smaller ships, fewer soldiers. By all logical calculation, you should have lost within months. But we didn't, Lisa said. No, you did not. Instead, you adapted. You learned. You found ways to turn your weaknesses into strengths. Most remarkable. Why did you start this war in the first place? Lisa asked. The Emperor was quiet for a moment. Because I could. Because the Empire had always taken what it wanted. Because no one had ever stopped us before. And now? Now I sit in chains in the hold of a human warship, traveling to face judgment by a species I thought was inferior. The galaxy has changed, Dr. Hayes. Your people have changed it. Lisa finished her examination and prepared to leave. As she reached the door, the Emperor spoke again. Doctor, may I ask you something? What? When we reach your homeworld, when I face this trial you humans speak of, will you testify about my condition? Will you tell them that I was treated well? Lisa looked back at him. If they ask me, I will tell them the truth. You have been treated according to human standards for prisoners of war. Thank you, the Emperor said quietly. As the Defiance continued its journey through hyperspace, news of the Emperor's capture spread to every corner of the galaxy. On distant worlds, beings who had never heard of humans before now whispered about the species that had defeated the mighty Zephyrian Empire. In the neutral zone, alien merchants changed their trade routes to avoid human space, not from fear but from respect. On the borders of the Empire, rebel groups that had fought Zephyrian rule for decades took new hope from humanity's victory. And on Earth, in the halls of the Terran Senate, politicians and military leaders prepared for the most important trial in human history. They knew that how they handled Emperor Valdris would determine humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. The ship flew on through the darkness between stars, carrying its precious and dangerous cargo toward a date with destiny. The blue marble of Earth grew larger on the main screen as the UES Defiance approached home. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching his homeworld get closer with each passing hour. Around Earth, hundreds of ships waited in orbit. Some were human vessels, but many were alien ships from across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Lieutenant Amy Carter checked her communication board and shook her head in amazement. Captain, we have requests for landing permission from 43 different news organizations. The Galactic Broadcasting Network wants exclusive coverage rights. The Centauri News Service is offering to pay us for interviews. Jake rubbed his tired eyes. 3 weeks of travel had worn on everyone aboard the ship. Deny all requests. This is not a show. This is justice. Admiral Karen White appeared on the communication screen. She was Jake's commanding officer and one of the smartest military minds in human space. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her blue eyes were sharp and focused. Jake, good work bringing the Emperor home safely, she said. But now the real work begins. Every major government in the galaxy is watching what we do next. Some want us to turn him over to them. Others want us to execute him immediately. A few are threatening military action if we don't release him. What are our orders, Admiral? The Terran Senate has decided the Emperor will face trial in our courts. But first, he will be presented to the Senate in a formal ceremony. The whole galaxy will watch as we show them that humans believe in justice, not revenge. Jake felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Admiral, with respect, parading a prisoner through the Senate sounds like revenge to me. Admiral White smiled, grimly. Not revenge, Jake. Demonstration. For 6 years, the galaxy watched the Empire attack us without lifting a finger to help. They thought we were too weak to matter. Today, they learn otherwise. The Defiance received clearance to land at Geneva, Spaceport, the largest military facility on Earth. As the ship descended through the atmosphere, Jake could see crowds of people gathered behind security barriers. Some held signs supporting the military. Others demanded justice for the dead. All of them wanted to see the alien emperor who had brought war to their world. Security Chief Tony Rodriguez met Jake at the landing bay. Tony was a short, thick man, with gray hair and scars from the early battles of the war. He had lost his left arm in the defense of Mars, but he had not let that slow him down. Captain, we have a problem, Tony said as soon as Jake stepped off the ship. Everyone wants a piece of this emperor. The press, the politicians, the families of war victims. Security is going to be a nightmare. What's our plan? Simple and direct. We move the prisoner from the ship to a secure transport. Then we drive, straight to the Senate building. No stops, no detours, no interviews. Jake nodded. Good. The less time we spend exposed, the better. Dr. Lisa Hayes supervised the transfer of Emperor Valdris from the ship to the transport vehicle. The Emperor had been given clean clothes that fit his large frame. His chains had been polished until they shone like silver. Even as a prisoner, he still looked like royalty. As they walked from the ship to the transport, the Emperor stopped and looked up at the blue sky above Earth. White clouds drifted slowly across the heavens, and the sun felt warm on his armored skin. So this is your homeworld, he said quietly. It is beautiful. Lisa looked up at the sky too. After 3 weeks in space, she had forgotten how good it felt to breathe real air and feel natural sunlight. Yes, it is. This is what you tried to destroy. The Emperor nodded slowly. I see now why you fought so hard to protect it. The transport vehicle was built like a tank with windows. Its armor could stop most weapons, and its communication systems were connected directly to military command. As they drove through the streets of Geneva, crowds lined the sidewalks to watch them pass. Inside the transport, the Emperor sat quietly between 2 guards. His 4 arms were chained together, but his eyes took in everything they passed. He saw children playing in parks, families walking together, and normal people living normal lives. Your people seem happy, he observed. Free people usually are, Jake replied. Free? The Emperor repeated the word thoughtfully. In my empire, happiness comes from order and obedience. Your people find happiness in chaos and choice. We don't call it chaos. We call it freedom. The Terran Senate building was a massive structure made of white stone and glass. It had been built to impress visitors from other worlds with tall columns and wide steps leading to the main entrance. Today, security forces surrounded the building like a fortress. Senator Rachel Collins waited at the main entrance. She was a tall woman with kind eyes and silver hair. She had been elected Senate President just 2 years before the war started, and she had led humanity through its darkest hours with wisdom and courage. Captain Morrison, she said as Jake stepped out of the transport. On behalf of the Terran Senate and all humanity, thank you for bringing this war to an end. Thank you, Senator. But the war isn't over until we decide what to do with our prisoner. Senator Collins looked at the Emperor as he emerged from the transport. Even chained and defeated, Valdris was an impressive sight. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, and his 4 muscular arms showed the strength that had helped him conquer worlds. Emperor Valdris, she said formally, you are welcome to Earth not as a conqueror, but as a prisoner who will face justice for your crimes. The Emperor looked down at her with his compound eyes. Senator Collins, I have heard much about you during my journey here. You are the leader of a government that answers to common people rather than nobles. Most unusual. Not unusual. Democratic. We believe that government should serve the people, not rule them. Another human oddity, the Emperor said, but there was no mockery in his voice. The walk from the transport to the Senate chamber took 10 minutes. Every step was recorded by cameras from dozens of worlds. The sound of the Emperor's chains echoed off the marble walls and floors. His footsteps were heavy and slow, like the beating of a giant drum. News reporters spoke in hushed voices as they described what they were seeing. This is Zaxthul reporting for Centauri News Network. What we are witnessing today has never happened before in recorded galactic history. A species that achieved space travel less than 300 years ago is escorting the defeated ruler of the galaxy's most powerful empire through the halls of their government. Along the corridors, human citizens watched from behind security barriers. Some were military families who had lost loved ones in the war. Others were civilians who had survived attacks on the colonies. All of them watched the Emperor with expressions ranging from anger to curiosity to something that might have been pity. A young woman broke free from the crowd and ran toward the Emperor. Security guards moved to stop her, but she only wanted to speak. "My brother died on Kepler Station," she shouted. "He was 19 years old. He died because of you." The Emperor stopped walking and looked at her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he spoke in a voice that everyone could hear. I'm sorry for your loss. Your brother died because of my decisions. I cannot bring him back, but I can acknowledge that his death was my responsibility." The young woman stared at him in surprise. She had expected defiance or excuses, not an apology. Security guards gently led her back to the crowd, but her tears had turned from anger to confusion. As they approached the Senate chamber, the Emperor spoke to Jake one more time. "Captain, in my empire, defeated enemies are either executed or enslaved. What your people are doing today is completely unknown to me. Why do you give me this ceremony instead of simply killing me?" Jake thought about the question as they reached the chamber doors. "Because we want the galaxy to see who we really are. We want them to know that humans can be just as strong in victory as we were in war." The great doors of the Senate chamber swung open, and the Emperor saw hundreds of human representatives waiting inside. In galleries above them, diplomatic observers from dozens of worlds watched everything. Camera crews recorded every moment for broadcast across the galaxy. For the first time in his long life, Emperor Valdris felt truly afraid. Not afraid of death, but afraid of something he had never experienced before. He was afraid of being judged by his equals. The great doors of the Terran Senate chamber opened with a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the vast space. Captain Jake Morrison walked forward, leading Emperor Valdris into the heart of human government. Behind them came a small group of guards and officials. Ahead of them waited the most important moment in human history. The Senate chamber was huge and impressive. Circular rows of seats rose up like steps, with hundreds of senators sitting in each level. Above them, galleries held diplomatic observers from across the galaxy. Camera crews from dozens of worlds focused their equipment on the small group, walking across the floor. Emperor Valdris looked around the chamber with his compound eyes. In all his years of ruling, he had never seen anything like this. His own throne room was designed to make visitors feel small and afraid. This place was designed to make everyone feel equal. "So many," he said quietly to Jake. "How do you make decisions with so many voices?" "We debate, we argue, we vote. Sometimes it takes a long time, but the decisions we make represent all of humanity." "Chaos," the Emperor said. "Democracy," Jake corrected. Senator Rachel Collins stood at the center of the chamber behind a large wooden podium. Her voice carried clearly through the excellent acoustics of the room as she called for order. "Senators of Earth, representatives of humanity, observers from across the galaxy," she began. "Today we gather to witness something that has never happened before. We bring before this chamber the defeated leader of an empire that brought unprovoked war to our worlds." The chamber fell completely silent. Even the camera crews stopped moving. In that silence, the only sound was the soft music of the Emperor's chains as he walked to the center of the floor. Senator Collins continued, "Emperor Valdris of the Zephyrian Empire, you stand before the representatives of humanity not as a conqueror, but as a prisoner who must answer for the crimes committed against our people." The Emperor stood straight and tall despite his chains. His voice was deep and carried the same musical quality that made all Zephyrian speech sound strange to human ears. "Senators of Earth," he said, "I am here not by choice, but by the fortune of war. Your species has proven stronger than mine expected. I acknowledge my defeat." Senator Kevin Murphy stood up in the third row. He was an older man with white hair and sad eyes. During the war, his home colony of New Dublin had been completely destroyed by Zephyrian forces. "Emperor," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "New Dublin had 2 million people, men, women, children, elderly. Your forces killed them all. Why? What threat did farmers and shopkeepers pose to your mighty empire?" The Emperor looked directly at Senator Murphy. "No threat at all, Senator. They died because I ordered their deaths. They died because I believed that showing strength would make other colonies surrender quickly." "And now?" Senator Murphy asked. "Now I see that I was wrong. Your people do not surrender. They fight harder when threatened. I underestimated your species completely. Colonel Dan Hayes stood up from the military section. He wore his dress uniform with medals from every major battle of the war. His face was scarred from burns he had received during the defense of Europa Station. Emperor, my unit fought your forces on 6 different worlds. We saw what your soldiers did to prisoners. We saw how they treated civilians. You talk about strength, but what we saw was cruelty. The Emperor nodded slowly. You are correct, Colonel. My forces were cruel because I taught them to be cruel. In my empire, fear is considered a useful tool. Mercy is seen as weakness. Is that what you believe? The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. It is what I believed. These past weeks among your people have shown me that mercy can also be a form of strength. Senator Maria Santos stood up from the civilian section. She was young, maybe 25 years old, with dark hair and determined eyes. She had requested permission to speak, even though she was not a regular member of the Senate. Emperor, she said, her voice clear and strong. My parents died in the first attack on Proxima Colony. I was 15 years old when your ships came. I watched them die protecting me and my little sister. The Emperor's 4 arms shifted in their chains. I am sorry for your loss, young senator. I'm not a senator, Maria said. I'm just a citizen. But Senator Collins gave me permission to speak for all the civilians who lost family in this war. Then speak, Citizen Santos. I will listen. Maria took a deep breath. My parents believed that their sacrifice would protect humanity's future. They believed that someday justice would come for those who had hurt innocent people. Looking at you now, standing in chains in our Senate chamber, I think they were right. The Emperor's eyes seemed to focus more intently on Maria. Your parents sound like brave people. They were ordinary people who did extraordinary things when they had to, just like millions of other humans during this war. Yes, the Emperor said thoughtfully. I am beginning to understand that ordinary humans are capable of extraordinary things. This is something my empire never learned. Admiral Karen White spoke from the military command section. Emperor Valdris, you ruled an empire of 12-star systems with billions of citizens. You had technology centuries ahead of ours. You had weapons that could destroy planets. How did you lose to a species you considered primitive? The Emperor considered the question carefully. Admiral, I lost because I did not understand what I was fighting. I thought I was conquering a weak species with inferior technology. Instead, I attacked a species that refuses to give up, that adapts to any challenge, that fights harder when threatened. But surely your military advisors warned you about our capabilities. They did, but I did not listen. I believed that superior weapons and numbers were all that mattered in war. I was wrong. Senator David Park stood up from the science and technology section. What will you tell your people about this defeat? How will you explain to the Zephyrian Empire that humans were able to capture their emperor? I will tell them the truth, Senator. I will tell them that we attacked a species we did not understand. I will tell them that humans fight not just with weapons, but with ideas of freedom, of justice, of never surrendering to tyranny. And do you think they will listen? The Emperor's compound eyes seemed to dim slightly. Some will. Others will want revenge. My empire is likely already falling apart as different groups fight for power. That is what happens when a government rules through fear instead of consent. Senator Jennifer Walsh asked the question that everyone was thinking. Emperor, you have admitted to war crimes. You have acknowledged responsibility for millions of deaths. What do you think should happen to you? The Emperor stood even straighter. That is not my decision to make, Senator. In my empire, I decided the fate of others. Here, others will decide my fate. I find this interesting. Interesting? In my long life, I have never been held accountable for my actions. No one has ever questioned my decisions or told me I was wrong. This experience is completely new to me. Captain Morrison stepped forward. Emperor, during our journey to Earth, you seemed surprised by how we treated you. Why? Because you treated me with dignity despite what I had done. You gave me medical care, adequate food, and basic respect. In my empire, prisoners are treated as animals until they are executed. That's the difference between us, Jake said. We believe that even our enemies deserve basic human rights. Human rights, the Emperor repeated. Another concept unknown. In my empire, we have subjects, not citizens. We have obedience, not rights. Senator Collins spoke again. Emperor Valdris, you will now be given the opportunity to make a final statement before this chamber votes on your fate. The galaxy is watching. History will remember your words. What do you wish to say? The Emperor looked around the chamber one more time. He saw the faces of people who had every reason to hate him, but who were giving him a fair hearing anyway. He saw a form of government he had never imagined possible. He saw a species that had taught him more in a few weeks than he had learned in centuries of ruling. Senators of Earth, citizens of humanity. He began, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber and to every world watching the broadcast. I came to your space as a conqueror. I leave it as a student. Emperor Valdris stood in the center of the Senate chamber, his chains catching the light from the overhead lamps. Around him, hundreds of human senators waited to hear his final words. Above them, alien diplomats from across the galaxy leaned forward in their seats. Camera crews focused their equipment on the tall figure who had once ruled 12 star systems. Senators of Earth, citizens of humanity, the Emperor continued, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. I came to your space as a conqueror. I leave it as a student. You have taught me things that 300 years of absolute power could not teach me. Senator Rachel Collins watched the Emperor carefully. In all her years of politics, she had never seen anything like this moment. What have you learned, Emperor Valdris? I have learned that true strength comes not from the power to destroy, but from the wisdom to show mercy. I have learned that a government that serves its people is stronger than one that rules through fear. Most importantly, I have learned that I was wrong. The chamber was completely silent. Even the news reporters had stopped whispering to each other. The Emperor's words were being broadcast live to every major world in the galaxy. For 300 years, I believed that might made right. I believed that the strong should rule the weak without question. I believed that conquest was the natural order of things. The Emperor paused and looked around the chamber. You have shown me a different way. Senator Kevin Murphy stood up again. What would you do differently if you could change the past? The Emperor's compound eyes seemed to grow dim with sadness. I would never have attacked your worlds, Senator Murphy. I would have approached humanity as equals seeking trade and friendship instead of as conquerors seeking subjects. But you cannot change the past, Senator Murphy said. No, I cannot. But perhaps I can help shape a better future. Captain, Jake Morrison felt the weight of history pressing down on the chamber. 6 years of war had led to this moment. Millions of dead on both sides had paid the price for the Emperor's mistakes. Now humanity had to decide what justice looked like. Senator Maria Santos stood up once more. Emperor, if the Senate decides to spare your life, what would you do with that gift? The Emperor thought carefully before answering. I would spend whatever time remains to me trying to undo the damage I have caused. I would speak to my people about the lessons I have learned here. I would try to prevent future wars between our species. And if we decide that justice requires your death, then I will face that punishment with the same dignity that your people have shown me during my captivity. Admiral Karen White spoke from the military section. Emperor, your empire is already falling apart. 3 different factions are claiming the right to rule. If we release you, how do we know you won't start another war? The Emperor's 4 arms shifted in their chains. Admiral, I no longer have an empire to lead. My defeat here has broken the power structure that kept the Zephyrian worlds together. Even if you released me tomorrow, I doubt I could regain control. That doesn't answer my question. You are right to be cautious, Admiral. But I give you my word that if you spare my life, I will never again raise a weapon against humanity. I have seen what your species can accomplish when threatened. I have no desire to face your wrath a second time. Senator David Park asked a practical question. If we spare you, where would you go? What would you do? That would be for this Senate. To decide, Senator, I am your prisoner. My fate is in your hands. Dr. Lisa Hayes had been watching from the medical staff section. She stood up and spoke for the first time during the proceedings. Emperor Valdris, during our journey to Earth, you asked me to testify about your treatment. You wanted the Senate to know that you had been treated well. Why was that important to you? The Emperor looked at the doctor who had cared for him during the long trip home. Because it showed me who your people really are, Dr. Hayes. You could have tortured me for information. You could have starved me or beaten me or killed me slowly. Instead, you treated me with basic decency despite what I had done to your people. And what did that teach you? It taught me that mercy is not weakness. It taught me that civilization is measured not by how you treat your friends, but by how you treat your enemies. Senator Collins called for order as murmurs began to spread through the chamber. The questioning period is now complete. Emperor Valdris, you may return to your holding area while the Senate deliberates. As guards prepared to escort the Emperor away, he spoke one final time to the assembled senators. Whatever you decide, know that this day has changed me forever. You have shown me a better way to live, even if it comes too late for me to fully embrace it. The Emperor was led from the chamber, his chains echoing off the marble floors one last time. As soon as he was gone, the real debate began. Senator Collins called for opening statements from both sides. Those who wanted the Emperor executed spoke passionately about justice for the dead. Those who wanted to spare his life argued that mercy would show the galaxy humanity's true character. Colonel Dan Hayes surprised everyone by speaking in favor of sparing the Emperor's life. Senators, I have fought this being's armies on 6 worlds. I have seen the destruction he ordered. But I have also seen something else during these proceedings. I have seen a defeated enemy acknowledge his mistakes and express genuine remorse. Senator Murphy disagreed strongly. Colonel, with respect, remorse does not bring back the dead. Justice demands that those who commit war crimes face the ultimate penalty. The debate continued for hours. Senators shared stories of loss and courage from the war years. They discussed the legal precedents for trying war criminals. They argued about what message their decision would send to the galaxy. Finally, Senator Collins called for a vote. The question before this body is simple. Should Emperor Valdris be executed for his war crimes, or should he be sentenced to life? Imprisonment? The voting was conducted by electronic ballot to ensure accuracy. Each senator entered their choice privately, knowing that their decision would echo through history. When the last vote was cast, Senator Collins announced the results. By a vote of 412 to 388, this Senate has decided to spare the life of Emperor Valdris. He will be sentenced to life imprisonment on a monitored colony world, with the possibility of limited freedom if he demonstrates continued cooperation with peace efforts. The chamber erupted in mixed reactions. Some senators cheered the decision to show mercy. Others sat in angry silence, feeling that justice had not been served. In the galleries above, alien observers struggled to understand what they had witnessed. News of the decision spread instantly across the galaxy. On human worlds, people gathered around communication screens to debate whether their representatives had made the right choice. On alien worlds, governments tried to understand what this meant for future relations with humanity. The Emperor was brought back to the chamber to hear his sentence. Senator Collins addressed him formally. Emperor Valdris, this Senate sentences you to life imprisonment on the colony world of New Harmony. You will be given a small residence and allowed limited freedom of movement. In exchange, you will work with human diplomats to establish peaceful relations between our species. The Emperor bowed his head slightly. I accept this sentence, Senator Collins. I will do everything in my power to prevent future conflicts between our peoples. As the formal proceedings ended, Captain Jake Morrison reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 6 years ago, the war had begun with Zephyrian ships attacking human colonies without warning. Today, it ended with humanity, showing the galaxy that strength and mercy could exist together. Years later, historians would mark this day as the beginning of a new age in galactic politics. The image of Emperor Valdris in chains walking through the halls of human government became a symbol of how the galaxy's balance of power had shifted. But perhaps more importantly, it showed every species watching that humans were not just fierce warriors, but also just and merciful victors. The age of human expansion into the galaxy had truly begun, built on a foundation of strength tempered by wisdom. The Emperor kept his word. From his new home on New Harmony, he worked tirelessly to prevent future wars and to build understanding between humans and the scattered remnants of his former empire. He lived for 20 more years, becoming an unlikely advocate for peace and cooperation. When he died, both humans and Zephyrians mourned his passing. The being who had once been their greatest enemy had become their most valuable ally in building a more peaceful galaxy.